I was recently staying at a youth hostel in Cornwall, England. The manager warned me jovially when I arrived that there were 3 ghosts in the hostel, all linked to different areas in the building. He added with a mischievous grin that one of them had a particular dislike for the new computer that had been installed and seemed to keep switching it off. He chose to tell me this because the reason I was there was to do some work with that very computer. After an evening of unproductive work on the computer that obviously wasn't working properly, I retired to the small private room I had been given. I dropped off to sleep fairly quickly, but woke up after about an hour feeling cold, the reason for which became clear very quickly. The duvet from my bed was lying in a heap on the floor around my feet. I picked it up and covered myself, but then had trouble getting back to sleep as the couple in the next room were being very noisy. Eventually, they quieted down and I started to relax, but before I managed to fall asleep again, the duvet began to slowly slide down the bed as if pulled from the bottom. I let it move about 6 inches to see what was happening, then got hold and pulled back. Whatever was pulling gave up with relative ease, and I was soon covered again. At this stage, I can remember that rather than being frightened, I felt as if some silly game was going on, and I was almost giggling about the fact that some impish ghost had chosen me for an adversary in its little game. As a result, after a half hour or so, I had no trouble getting back to sleep. It seemed, however, that I hadn't taken things seriously enough and had managed to cause offense. The next time I woke up, it was with a startle, as the duvet began to quickly slide off the bed, again in the same direction towards my feet. This time, I decided that enough was enough and started to feel very afraid. You know what it's like in the dark at night. A simple duvet can seem to offer so much protection and security, and the potential lack of it made me feel very vulnerable. I think I managed to move about an inch before I found myself suddenly unable to move anymore. I couldn't actually feel any force or weight holding me or pressing down on me, but I was totally unable to move my arms or any part of my upper body except for my head. In fact, it felt like it was suddenly made from lead. I was then greeted by an old man's laugh. I had literally heard a very slow guttural sounding laugh, and it sounded far from pleasant. I fought and eventually managed to get my fingers to move slightly. As soon as I achieved this one small movement, everything was fine. The inability to move evaporated quickly, and I was left back in full control of my body. I stood right side up, surveying the entire room, and what I saw next terrified me. There were a pair of red eyes looking at me by the door for about 30 seconds before fading away. Just then, the door opened, and there was a light mist that moved through the door and then evaporated. I screamed, "I'm not afraid of you, and that tonight's rest will be a peaceful night's rest." I pulled the duvet back over myself, and surprisingly, only felt any kind of fear for a few minutes, and was soon relaxing again. Whatever the game was about, it seems that I had won, and that my adversary had admitted defeat fairly gracefully. I slept peacefully well for the remaining few hours of the night, and woke up perfectly refreshed in the morning. Since I was a little girl, my sisters and I have had frightening experiences with spirits. When I was 6, my family and I moved to a fairly new house, only 8 years old at the time, in West Texas. As far back as I can remember, We had strange things going on in that house. First off, at night, if you were to go through the hallway to get to my parents' room, you would always hear what sounded like a TV. You could hear voices and sometimes music. Most of the time, my parents' TV was off. If you left the room and stood in the hallway again, the sounds would be gone. Secondly, when I would try to go to sleep at night, I would always have that classic someone's watching me feeling. I always blamed it on me being a young child. The house was a very scary place to be at night. Wherever you went, someone was watching you. Friends who have spent the night rarely stayed twice. The areas of the house that scared everyone the worst were the hallway to my parents' room and my older sister's closet. The closet always had a feeling of hate radiating from it. I tried to spend a night in there with my scared sister, and it didn't last. I was sleeping on the floor with my head next to the closet, and that just wasn't a good feeling. I went back to my room after she fell asleep. A couple years after we moved in, my younger sister had a frightening experience. Her and I shared a bedroom with our beds parallel to each other, with a nightstand in between us. We were about 3 feet apart. One night, I woke up to her screaming my name. I woke up and asked what was wrong. She told me that, for no reason at all, she woke up and looked over at my bed. Laying at the foot of my bed was a light blue glowing figure of a woman. Her eyes were gone, and her mouth hung open. My sister described her as looking dead. My sister also added that she couldn't see me anywhere on the bed, so she started screaming my name and closed her eyes. When she opened them, I was awake, asking her what was wrong. She told me, and I looked down at the foot of my bed, and my huge stuffed animal that I had there every night was sparking like it had really bad static electricity. I took it off my bed and threw it in my bathroom sink and ran water over it. Being young, I thought it would help. Years later, my family and I moved to southern Louisiana and moved into a gated subdivision. One night, my 2 sisters were mad at me and left the house to go on a walk. I followed them without them knowing. I followed them up to the front gate of the subdivision and talked to them for a minute. They quickly left in a huff, being that they were still angry with me. For what? I don't remember now. I stayed by the gate for a couple of minutes afterwards, and then decided to run to the end of the main street and hide behind some bushes that faced the gate. I waited for my sisters to walk by, and when they did, unaware where I was hiding, stopped remotely in front of the bushes. I heard a younger sister say, "What is Jenny, me, doing, sitting on top of that stop sign? The stop sign is located next to the gate." After that, they walked on. I was a bit confused and was about to chase after them, but then, through the leaves, I saw a shadow of someone running past the bushes I was behind. I could also hear the sound of footsteps. I stood up quickly to see who was there. No one was in sight. After this, I ran to my sisters and told them what I had seen. They then told me that they saw me, or what looked like me, sitting on top of the stop sign. They said I had a very angry, disfiguring grin. After we traded stories, we ran home quickly. Later, my younger sister told me that the ghost she saw in my bed and the ghost she saw on the sign both looked exactly like me. It all began around the 1st of June this very year. The incident took place in my grandmother and grandfather's home. My grandfather had been diagnosed with cancer. In the summer of 1998, I didn't know that those last few months would be the last time I would ever see him alive. During that period of time, I had spent a whole lot of time with my grandparents, and it felt like I had actually gotten a little closer to them both, but particularly my grandfather. At the end of the summer, I left and went back home. Subsequently, about 5 months later, our family received a disturbing phone call. It was from my grandmother, informing us about the passing of our grandfather. He had passed away in the hospital, which was the very last place that our grandfather lived in before his passing. A month and a half after we had been staying there, I noticed that something just didn't feel right. The whole atmosphere had changed. I decided to take the guest room. For some reason, I always got the feeling that I was being watched in the guest room. Then, other little occurrences started to evolve. The very first was, I always felt like somebody was standing over my shoulder. I started to notice scars on my back after I would awake in the mornings. I would feel like touches on my back. My mom and brother both complained about the door handles being rattling and opening and closing really fast. Cabinet doors would fly open, and the pots and pans would all fall out. My hair would get pulled in the night. Diminutive objects would fall from midair, such as paper, hair clips, and coins, and I would hear voices, one of which said "wake up" very loudly in my ear. I would see mists and rays of light shoot past me extremely fast. So fast, in fact, I would hear a whoosh of air. I would notice some of my belongings missing, such as my CDs, jewelry, money, to name a few. Usually belongings that I would use around the house. I would feel my bed move, as if someone were to bump into it during the night, flickering lights, and last, but certainly not least, since animals can sometimes see things humans cannot see, my cat would turn her head really fast and just stare at something, which I would not be able to see for a significant amount of time. A little while later, about a month after being there, I saw the unthinkable. After I'd been sound asleep for about 7 hours or so, I woke up suddenly to a spirit at the foot of my bed, and it was my grandfather. I could not believe what I was seeing, but I will describe this to you in full detail. There was no doubt in my mind that this was actually a spirit. He was shadowy-like, but his clothing was colored. He would always wave at me, and sure enough, he was waving my direction with a smile on his face. It was plain to see that he was trying to get my attention. He just wanted to see me. I was too afraid to move a muscle, in fear that in spite of everything else that he would approach me. I'd never seen anything like this before in my entire life. I didn't want to tell this to anyone though. I thought that maybe nobody would believe me or listen. About a week later, I was in the kitchen with my mom, and she told me that the guest room was where our grandpa had stayed in before he died, because he was too ill. That explains the reason why that very room felt like the most eerie room in the house. I almost fainted when I discovered that, but I knew that a spirit can travel anywhere in the home, even outside or in back of the house. But it wasn't until a month later that I decided to come out with the news. I first confided in my mom and my brother, and my mother believed me, because she said that before I brought up anything that I had said. Our grandmother had experienced the exact same thing, that he was at the foot of the bed watching over her, and smiling. I had a phone conversation with her, and I let her do all the talking first, and everything that she told me measured up with my experience, and it only happened to my grandmother and I, whom he was the closest with before he passed away. Everyone was wondering why I didn't scream or attempt to run out of the guest room as soon as I saw him, but I was too afraid. Whenever you're that close to something like that, it just takes your breath away completely. I was in my own little calm. It felt very uncomfortable. It wasn't until I started sleeping on the living room sofa that I felt appeased, albeit this has not been my first experience. Ever since the age of 5, My family and I started traveling around a lot, and we would move here and there. I've went to 9 different schools total. I'm 17 now. In previous homes, I've experienced a whole lot. I lived in a haunted house for a total of 3 years. Not only by all of the experiences that I've endured, I've been doing many researches involving the paranormal. I'm really good at picking up on things too, which I've found out. There was this one house that we went into that we were thinking about purchasing, but I felt like something was wrong. There were several rooms in the home that I could just not stop venturing off into. The main ones were the master bedroom and the study. After I left the house, I told my parents that someone from the house must have passed away. So my mom went to go look up the history of the house, and sure enough, the owner and his wife on a trip to California got killed in a car wreck, and they lived in the master bedroom, and the owner spent most of his time in the study. After I was enlightened with that information, I was in disbelief. I still am to this day too. My mom told me that it goes back to her being Jewish and Indian. She said that she can pick up on and see things too. She claims that it's an Indian thing, but I don't know. Maybe it is. Anyways, God bless everyone, and thank you for your time. Great website, by the way. I'm a current visitor. When I was in high school, my family lived in a rented farmhouse in the country. I was 17 and dating a very nice gentleman who had come to visit me for the evening. My mother worked nights and usually got home around 11 p.m. or so. My boyfriend and I were sitting on the floor in the living room, leaned up against the couch watching TV, when the kitchen door opened and the light came on. We both heard a thump like my mother had put her purse on the table, and then the bathroom door opened and closed. We both thought that was odd, because usually my mother would not have turned on the light, because my dad is a light sleeper, and the light would have woke him up, and my mother would have at least said hi to us anyway. My boyfriend noticed that it was getting late, and he needed to get home. We had expected snow, and he didn't want to be caught in a storm. I got his coat, and we walked to the door together, and stood on the back porch watching the snowfall. As my mother pulled in, my boyfriend made us both wait on the porch as he searched the house from one end to the other. No one was in there other than my sister, upstairs asleep, and my dad, who was sound asleep in the back bedroom. Many other things happened there. One night, me and my boyfriend decided to play the Ouija board to summon the spirit that was residing in the house. I remember it was a blizzard that day, and my entire family except for me were in another state visiting my extended family. We were asking questions about the spirit. At first we asked its name. Nothing happened. Then we asked if we were bothering him. Still nothing. After nearly 20 minutes of continuously trying to get in touch with someone, my boyfriend angrily grabbed the planchette and Ouija board and threw it out of the window. He said he had enough of this make-believe and that he was really starting to get tested. I told him he shouldn't have done that he could really upset whatever was living in the house. My boyfriend mockingly says, "Sure, why doesn't this stupid spirit just possess me if it even exists? Make some real noise." My boyfriend gets frustrated and ends up sleeping on the couch because he was tired of playing games. Later that night, around 3 a.m., I was awakened in the middle of the night to hear my telephone landline ringing. The only problem was, there was no landline telephone here. We all had our cell phones, and they were on silent. Seconds later, I hear loud pounding on the door to my bedroom, and it's slightly opened. I yell out to my boyfriend, but there was no answer. I hear the phone ringing again, but I couldn't locate the sound. Then, everything fell silent. Not a second later, I hear a gargling noise coming from the living room, mixed with prayer. It was coming from my boyfriend's mouth. He was violently whispering in his sleep. What really got me, though, is I went to see my boyfriend on the couch. There was this very dark cloud floating above him for a few seconds. It disappeared, and then I heard my boyfriend choking, so I ran towards him. He was literally pale in the face, almost as if he stopped breathing. That's when I realized he did seem to stop breathing. I frantically shaked him, yelling at him to wake up. I started getting scared, and I cried. This time, my phone went off, and someone was on the other line. All I heard was what sounded like a low voice saying call, and the phone call disconnected. This was on my cell phone. I then called the paramedics. They arrived. Paramedics were in my house, checking my boyfriend's pulse. That's when he wakes up, delirious, but confused. He asked me what's going on. After talking with the paramedics and my boyfriend, they were convinced that he had a panic attack in his sleep, and they ended up leaving. But he told me something very scary. He said that while he was asleep, he had this odd dream that someone was trying to get him to go to the afterlife with them. There was this hooded figure who said nothing to him. He was just motioning towards the sky, and then all of a sudden, he was in a cemetery and saw himself in a coffin dead. I told him, this all makes sense because you threaten the spirits. This is 100% true, and all I have is my word. But believe me, these events happened. I can't explain the mysterious phone call. I'm sure that my boyfriend challenged the spirit to make some noise, because it certainly made some noise. You ever look up to the moon and wonder why the stars aren't flickering yet? That's because this ghost story will tell you more about what's going on. I'm just kidding, because you have to subscribe and share this video if you want it to do well. Anyway guys, no, it's me, not Storyman. Well, I am the Storyman, obviously, because you're listening to this story, but thank you so much for actually tuning into this video again. I hope you really enjoyed it, and let me know in the comment section below which story you love the most. Personally, my favorite story was the one at the very end that actually talked about, demonic possession or something of that sort. It was definitely a ghostly, kind of Grim Reaper tale of sorts, which was really cool to me. So I don't know what you guys thought about the story, if it was too fanatical or too fantastic, or you thought it was unbelievable or something, but I personally believe that was realistic to me, but I don't know. You're going to have to tell me in the comment section below. But yeah, seriously, guys, thank you so much for being the best that you can possibly be. Thank you for helping me get to 24K, and we're going to create more stories for you guys down the road. So obviously, you guys got this video to enjoy. Anyway, guys, no, seriously, go ahead and share this video anywhere you possibly can. You always make a difference no matter where you share this video. And that's it, really. So, guys, love you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.